Hello everyone, how are you? And welcome to Tambarara. My name is Sharon and I'm joined by Mr. Tendai Biti, our former finance minister and a well-known economist and a politician. Today we're going to be discussing issues around the economy. Welcome Mr. Tendai Biti, we welcome you to Tambarara. Maybe my first question to you is, during your tenure as a finance minister, how did you use the SDR and how much was left when you left office?
Yes, so you recall that there was a global economic crisis from 2007 to it tapered off in 2009. The global economic crisis was essentially a crisis created in the West by the West because of over-accumulation, over-speculation, and the economies of the West overheating. Banks were lending money that they didn't have. So the crisis of over-accumulation created the global economic crisis. So economies suffered. So what the G7 did was to create a fund. I call it a penancy fund, a guilty fund, to say we are sorry to the rest of the world that didn't create this crisis. So they agreed to pay penalties in the form of SDRs that were given to the IMF, which then gave to little countries like Zimbabwe and the rest of the third world who suffered during the global economic crisis, but did not create the global economic crisis. So on its part, Zimbabwe received special drawing rights, which were equivalent to around US $550 million. We used around $200 million for construction, for gross capital formation. So we used part of the money to complete the Joshua Ngabukongomo International Airport in Bulawayo. We used part of the money to complete the Tokemkosi or Tugimkosi dam in Masvingo. We used part of the money to complete Nema Dam in Bulawayo, in Matebeleland. We used part of the money to complete Wenimbi Dam in Marondera. More appropriately, the pipeline between Wenimbi Dam and the town of Marondera. We used part of the money to do some roads. I think we began the dualization of the Harare Marondera road, which the ZANU-PF government obviously failed to complete. So we left US $300 million, which were the only reserves that Zimbabwe had for a long time, until a few years ago when the government just spent the money. So as I'm talking right now, we don't have reserves because the ZANU-PF government used the US $300 million that I left, which were kept in Zimbabwe's account at the IMF in Pennsylvania Street, Washington, D.C.
Right. What criteria does the IMF use in giving out the SDR?
So when you become a member of the IMF and the World Bank, you get a shareholding. So Zimbabwe is a shareholder, but the shareholding is very tiny. In the case of Zimbabwe, it's less than 2%. So you get your share is dependent on your shareholding. So it's like a dividend. So in a company, if you are a 50% shareholder, you get 50% of the dividend that has been declared. So if $100 has been declared, you get $50 if your shareholding is 50%. But if you are 2%, it means you get 2% of $100, which is $2. So it's a percentage of the shareholding.
During your term in office as the finance minister, how did you introduce the US dollar and how did you stabilize the economy?
So before we go there, I need to talk about the current SDR that Zimbabwe is received of almost $1 billion. When we spent and allocated the money that we got in 2010, we actually went to Parliament. We actually put the money in the budget and then went to Parliament and asked Parliament to give us permission to spend the money because the money belongs to the people of Zimbabwe. And Section 302 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe says every dollar that is received by Zimbabwe must be accounted to the Consolidated Revenue Fund, which is essentially the budget. So I'm very saddened, and we're very saddened that the current Minister of Finance, Mthuli Ncube, he is not going to Parliament to say, I intend to spend this money this way, because that is the only way to comply with the Constitution. And in the absence of that, it means you are now acting illegally. It means you are now acting unconstitutionally. I'm also disturbed by the fact that if you read this budget statement for 2022, he says part of the money is going to support the auction floor, the foreign exchange auction floor. Now that is very sad because you and I know that in the last 2 years, only less than 26% of the population has accessed the foreign currency market. You also know that ZANU-PF is who. Crony capitalism is dominating that auction system. Kudata Gwirei and his companies are getting more than 50% of the money that is being allocated. So these ZANU-PF elites go to the auction, buy the US dollar at a cheap price of 1:83, 1:90, 1:110, and then go and sell it at the exorbitant black market rate of today's US 1:250. It's only a question of time before it hits 300. In fact, I would like to submit by March it will have hit 300. And by November of 2022, mark my words, it will have hit 500. So there's an arbitrage. It's the easiest way of making money in Zimbabwe, going to the auction floor. So if you noticed what we did in 2010, we supported capital projects that benefit everyone. The airport in Bulawayo benefits Zimbabweans. The Harare Marondera Road benefits Zimbabweans. So you can't you can't use the SDR as a means of self-enrichment of a few ZANU-PF characters that in the past I've called roving bandits or zvigananda ZANU-PF, my archbishop ehungori. You can't do that. Now I'm now going to your question. How did we introduce the US dollar and how did we stabilize the economy? It was not the wisdom of government. It was not my wisdom. The use of the Zimbabwean dollar in 2009, the adoption of the Zimbabwean dollar in 2009. The market rejected the Zimbabwean dollar. My Ezra Ndutito rejected the Zimbabwean dollar. Mrs. Duve in Ngai rejected the Zimbabwean dollar. In other words, the Zimbabwean public rejected the Zimbabwean dollar for the simple and good reason that the Zimbabwean dollar had become an instrument of arbitrage. So where you have arbitrage, where you have illegitimacy, where you have brigands now controlling the economy, the citizen shifts his wealth into safer zones of autonomy. So they will either buy immovable property, houses, or they will put the money in a safe currency, the US dollar or the rand. And this is what happened in 2006, in 2007. What we did in 2009 was simply to recognize de jure, in other words, legally, something that had already taken place de facto, in other words, on the ground. That is what we did when we dollarized in 2009. Which brings me to the present day. The people of Zimbabwe rejected the Zimbabwean dollar. As I always say, the Zimbabwean dollar was caught in flagranto. When you are caught in flagranto, it means you are a husband who is caught red-handed with a paramour. So trust is gone. Zimbabweans don't trust the Zimbabwean dollar. They don't like the Zimbabwean dollar, which is why, despite the use of force, the use of the police to try and enforce the Zimbabwean dollar on the people of Zimbabwe, the people of Zimbabwe have totally and thoroughly rejected the same, including the government itself. All its taxes are levied in US dollars. If you want to buy a license, you pay US dollars. If you want to buy a passport in Zimbabwe, you pay in USA dollars. If you want to buy a death certificate, you pay in US dollars. If you want to buy a grave for your beloved one, the local council will charge you in US dollars. So everyone, including the regime of Emerson Mnangagwa, have rejected the Zimbabwean dollar. So if that is the case, why keep on the pretense of the auction? Why keep on keeping on the pretense of de-dollarization when de-dollarization has failed? So why not simply re-dollarize, pay civil servants in US dollars, pay doctors in US dollars, pay nurses in US dollars, pay teachers in US dollars, pay the working people in US dollars? Then you remove the distortions and the termites like Kudakwache Tagwirei. It's simple.
All right. One of the sectors that has been problematic or that has been giving issues has been the civil service sector. They've been demanding salary increment or foreign currency in their salaries. How did you manage that sector whilst you were in office?
What we did was so the US dollar is not a panacea to economic stability. In other words, the US dollar on its own can't save you. And that's why it didn't save ZANU-PF when Chinamasa was Minister of Finance and there was exclusive use of the Zimbabwean, of the US dollar. It didn't save Mutuli Ngube when you used the US dollar until February of 2019 when he introduced the SI 33 of 2019. You need other instruments, particularly fiscal instruments, to stabilize the economy. So one of the things that we did and did very well was to live within our means, was to maintain a tight fiscal ship under the mantra of what I used to call we eat what we kill. So if we collect $10, we spend $10. If we kill a rat, we spend a rat. In economics, 1 minus 2, it can't. If you say 1 minus, problem with the deficit economics is not the fact that you have got a gap between your revenue and your expenditure. The problem is, how do you monetize the gap? How do you cover this gap? So I want to give a simple example. A man earns $50, but he stays in a big house in Kuadzana that costs $80. So every month he has got a deficit of $30. Every month he has got a deficit of $30, being the difference between $80 that he pays for rent and $50. So the problem in Africa is not this gap. The problem is, how do you cover the gap? In Africa now, they cover this gap through extra-legal means, through artificial means, through unsustainable means. So if you are going to cover this gap, in my example, by robbing people so that you get $30, it's a question of time you'll be caught. If you are going to cover this gap by pimping, you become a male prostitute, you are going to be caught. So the problem now with African government, they are pimps and robbers because they begin to print money, which they don't have to cover this gap. And when you print money, you steal from me and you because you are now creating inflation. You are now making your own currency worthless. And that is exactly what Patrick Chinamasa did. That is exactly what Mutuli Ngube did. There was a gap. Then they started printing money. They started raiding the central banks for people's foreign currency. And before you knew it, we now had a surrogate currency called the RTGS. an artificial currency called the RTGS, a fiat currency. So they began running a Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme is where you spend money which you don't have. Somewhere along the lines, this Ponzi scheme, this pyramid scheme will collapse. And that is why the Zimbabwean dollar collapsed. It collapsed because the Reserve Bank, Mutuli Ngube and Patrick Chinamasa were spending money which they didn't have. They were printing money using treasury bills. So treasury bills are like a check. So I give you the treasury bills and I say, I'm giving you this instrument and I promise to pay you in 2 years' time. So I've created money, but that money is not supported by anything. It's not supported by production. It's not supported by factories working. So that is how the Zimbabwean dollar collapsed. It collapsed because the Zimbabwean government was running an expansionary fiscal policy. They were spending that which they were not having. They were killing a rabbit, but eating an elephant. And it doesn't work. So the Zimbabwean dollar collapsed because they had a gap which they couldn't finance. So in my earlier example, they are equivalent to a man who earns $50 but stays in an $80 house, but he has to rob neighbors in order to find the $30. It doesn't work. It won't work. You'll be caught by the police and the Zimbabwean economy, and the US dollar was caught by reality. So in our case, we spend what we had. We didn't create a deficit. That is why the US dollar remained sustainable. When I left, there was 6.5 billion US dollars broad money supply in the system. You could go on an ATM and withdraw any US dollar you wanted. You could withdraw $100,000, $1 million. All you needed to do was to give the bank a day or two's notice. So the key thing was that we ran the economy prudently and very strictly. And that's the best thing that we did. And also, part of the problem with this regime is that they're corrupt. So they've created, I was going to say, rivers of leakages. These are not rivers of leakages. These are oceans of leakages. So they steal through the US dollar, as I've explained before. They steal through command agriculture. They steal through fuel. Who controls fuel? Tagwirei controls fuel. Tagwirei controls the pipeline with the traffic gura. Then when you come to retail fuel, there are essentially two service stations in Zimbabwe. Puma and Zuva. One is controlled by Kuda Tagwirei. The other one is controlled by his a friend that you know, the one who loves this scarf. So they control everything. Three, they steal through contracts, procurement. All these roads are being done by 5 companies. Most of them are Kuda's, companies. Fossil, construction, for instance. So all procurement, they steal through procurement. They steal through privatizations. Banks have been privatized. First Mutual Life, Fidelity gold printers, 11 gold mines have been given to Kuda Tagwirei. Zupco has been privatized. It's now owned by Kuda Tagwirei. They steal through subsidies. Subsidies are given to gold miners, which is a euphemism for Kuda Tagwirei and so forth. So when you have an economy that is hemorrhaging, that is iri kujuja gazi zvatinoita pachikore-kore, imwe tsinga iri kubuda ropa, imwe tsinga iri kubuda ropa, that economy can't survive. So under Emerson Mnangagwa, this economy can't survive because there's so much hemorrhage, there's so much leakages in the form of corruption. And when you have that, when you have got so many leakages, it means you've got so much illicit money flowing into the economy. That has to be dry cleaned. All this money that they're getting from government through illicit transactions has to be dry cleaned. It has to go into the economy. When it goes into the economy, it makes the economy overheat. It creates a crisis of overaccumulation. It creates a situation where there's too much money chasing too few goods. How do we know that the economy is overheated? We know because the price of goods is going up, even in US dollar terms. We know because we see symbols of accumulation. People are driving Lamborghinis. People are driving new vehicles that have no name, that I've never even seen on television. These roving bandits, because they've got so much money, which they don't know what to do with it. They're buying houses for girlfriends, small houses, and so forth. The cost of real estate has gone up. You can't afford a house. Your generation can't afford a house, even in Budiriro, even in Kuadzana, because the cost has gone up because there are dealers that have got so much money and they don't know where to put it. So this economy is overheated, is overaccumulated. If you go to restaurants right now, they're full of people. They're full of people. There are little boutiques that are selling dresses that cost $10,000 in Zimbabwe. There are people that are putting on shoes that cost $10,000. You know it better than I do. Why? Because there's so much illegal money that is in the economy. Without COVID, they'll be going to Dubai every day. And you see them on social media because they post. Where is the money coming from? The money is coming from these contracts. Illegal gold dealings, illegal diamond dealings, illegal platinum dealings, illegal fuel dealings, illegal allocation of foreign currency at the auction flow, illegal privatizations. So this economy is overheated, but it's only benefiting a few individuals, roving bandits. They're not more than 100. They're not more than 100. The rest of us, we are like ants. As Changira used to say, "Trunonga sosine muromo." So it's a disaster, but you see it. But perhaps you don't understand what is happening. The economy is overheated. There's a crisis of overaccumulation. Too much money is chasing too few goods, controlled by a few people, that men and these children, and their associates, roving bandits, Zhigananda.
Okay, while you were in office, you started the dematerialization of the stock exchange, where you wanted the government to get a significant stake. My question is, was government supposed to get the majority stake on the stock exchange?
Yeah, we actually tried to we actually what we did was we made the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange into a private limited company, but we wanted to make the government a minority shareholder because it's just a market. It's just like Mpenzanamo. You understand? The stock exchange is just like Mpenzanamo, but whereas at Mpenzanamo they sell clothes, the stock exchange sells shares and equities. So the government has no business at Mpenzanamo. The government has no business at Mbare Musika or Renkin bus terminal, market. So equally, the government should have no business in a stock exchange. So I don't support the fact that the government is the majority, shareholder. The government should only come in as a regulator to see that there is no insider trading, there is no shenanigans. Because stockbrokers can be extremely naughty. Speculation, manipulation of share prices, insider trading, and so forth. So the government should strengthen its regulatory, framework. And in fact, we were moving towards creating one fiscal regulator. But the problem right now is that you've got multi-variable regulators. So you've got the stock exchange, which is regulated by the Security Exchange Commission, SEC. You've got banks that are regulated by the Reserve Bank. But that too is a problem because it is the Reserve Bank itself which registers banks. So you can't register, you can't create, you can't give birth and then mark that child. Kuti ari boy or as boy. You understand. So then you've got insurance companies that are regulated by IPEC. Then you have got so the country is suffering from the weight of multiple regulatory agencies. Our proposal is to have one central regulator that regulates the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, that regulates banks, that regulates the insurance sector. That is so essential. That's best practice. That is best practice. And then the government now must be out of these entities. The government must be out of these entities. And that will allow the government to deal with its social agenda. One of the biggest entities in Zimbabwe is NASA. NASA is a parastatal, but NASA receives millions and millions of dollars from government. But there's no one who regulates NASA. It's not under IPEC, it's not under SEC, but NASA is one of the biggest players on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange because it doesn't know where to put its money. It's clearly the biggest insurer because it offers insurance to every worker in Zimbabwe. It's compulsory. You understand? So it's both on the stock exchange, it's both in the insurance sector, but it's not regulated. So in my respectful opinion, NASA needs to be unbundled so that the social fund that is there to look after workers' interests remains on its own. And then these other things that are now wasting their time. The capitalist ventures, buying of shares in First Mutual Life, owning banks such as NBS, owning flats, owning real estate. That is now the focus of the NASA board. That should go. Because it's now prejudicing. A separate company needs now to be created, run by workers, because workers are the ones who contribute. Then the shares now, the profits, the dividends go to workers. Workers are getting peanuts. They're getting $40. Sometimes it's not even worth it to come from Dotito to come and collect your pension payout in Harare, because your pension payout is eaten just by transport costs. So unbundle NASA, let it stand on its own. Let it stand on its own. The social fund, the social security fund. Regrettably, that is not the case anymore. So NASA has become this huge, unregulated predator that is causing mess. That has now become a vehicle of asset stripping, because the likes of Kudata Gwire are now going it to strip for cheap in RTGS dollars assets that were bought by the workers of Zimbabwe. So they've bought the shares of First Mutual Life from NASA, Kudata Gwire. They've bought ZB Bank. That's Kudata Gwire. So you can't have this public body now being used as a vehicle of asset stripping by termites such as Kudakwache Gwire. It's a disaster, a complete disaster, and a disaster in capital terms. It's already signed into law. What Mutuli Ngube did, he sneaked. In 2015, there was a separate standalone RBZ debt assumption bill of $1.5 billion. And MPs debated that. And remember, because it was such an important issue, MPs went out, certainly the Budget and Finance Committee, went out to solicit the public views, consistent with Section 141 of the Constitution, which says if there's any law, the public must be consulted. Now, a finance bill, the finance bill, that comes with the budget, it deals with tax measures. Tax has gone up on cigarettes. It's not consulted. You don't consult. The Minister of Finance doesn't consult, because you don't say to a businessman, I want to increase tax from the 1st of January by 40%. You just run away. So he abused the finance bill now. He misused the finance bill by actually sneaking in it now. The debt assumption of $3.4 billion. And Mr. Mnangagwa has already signed this bill. So it's Nicodemus, it's dishonest, it's terrible, and it's typical Mutuli Ngube, a totally dishonorable and thoroughly dishonest man. But where is the $3.4 billion coming from? So what they've been doing, he has been pretending that he's running a surplus. But meanwhile, his deficit has been maintained by borrowings that have been taking place at the RBZ. So at the RBZ, that's why he has been hiding his deficit, because he has not been eating what he's been killing. He has not been living within his means. So the Reserve Bank, through John Panonetsa, says, the 3.4 billion Mutuli is not my problem. It's your problem. Take it over. So he sneaks it in now to avoid Parliament saying, but give us the actual breakdown of this 3.4 billion. Who actually is owed and what for? Because names are just put in. Marie Chikwere Chikambowani say Mutuli has avoided that. So I hope that there will be members of parliament and there will be citizens who will be able to take the government to court and parliament to court to say, you can't sneak into the finance bill. Something which the Finance Act was never designed for. The Finance Act is only designed for taxes, but not a policy issue such as a debt which requires public consultation, public scrutiny, and first reading, second reading, third reading, and prior gazetting for 14 days. A finance bill is not gazetted.
All right, just to wrap up, in your view, what do you think needs to be done to the Zimbabwean economy?
We need to re-dollarize. We need to start using the US dollar again so that workers can be paid in US dollars. The irony right now is that workers are earning in RTGS, but every expense is paid in US dollars. So if you've got a small little car, you Honda Fit, you live in Kwadzana, you have to find the US dollar. Your landlord in Kwadzana doesn't accept RTGS. There is no landlord in Zimbabwe who accepts RTGS. So that worker now is now being forced to take his little 22,000 RTGS to go to 4th Street to buy the US dollar at a premium of US 220 million, 220,000, 250,000 to then pay the landlord. So by the end of the day, the worker is in a net deficit situation. It's cheaper for the worker to just sit at home than to actually go and work. Because every month that the worker goes to work, he's actually accumulating debt. He's actually accumulating a deficit. So you have created a situation of pauperization of workers, pauperization of your workers, which is why for the last 2 years, teachers have basically not gone to work. Because going to work means you are creating more problems for yourself. Because which other transport, which other lunch, and so forth. It's really a disaster, a complete disaster.
Thank you so much for watching Tambarara. We had former Finance Minister Tendai Biti and an economist. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share our page, Tambarara, on YouTube. My name is Sharon. Join us next week on the next episode. Thank you.